We live in an era where uncertainty is no longer the exception. It has become the norm. From Ukraine to the Middle East, and from energy markets to migration flows, the Eastern Mediterranean stands at the center of global change. In this episode, we speak with Achilles Tsirgis, whose academic and professional work focuses on international economics, public policy, and geopolitical risk. After completing graduate studies at the London School of Economics and Columbia University in New York, he now works in the field of economic analysis and financial risk, examining how global instability and political uncertainty shape international markets. Coming to our topic, the Eastern Mediterranean is often described as a region of instability. But, Mr. Tsirgis, what does cause the instability of this region?
I would begin by saying that uncertainty usually stems from heterogeneity, right? In financial markets, in economic markets, but in political institutions as well, what builds certainty is homogeneity, and predictability, first of all, which usually stems from a sense of homogeneity. This can be homogeneity over geography or homogeneity over time. And so this is particularly interesting because here you have a region that is not homogeneous neither in geography nor in time. And I think that if you analyze it from this lens, you can really see fundamentally why this is an area of uncertainty.
The war in Ukraine transformed energy into one of Europe's greatest vulnerabilities. And suddenly, the Eastern Mediterranean became central to Europe's strategic future.
So you've seen, we've had the crisis, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we had a crisis, an energy crisis that ensued. And we saw that the particular alternatives for the inflows of energy in the EU were quite limited. The cooperation that currently exists in the Eastern Mediterranean for the procurement of gas and for oil is not at the extent that it should have been in order to be able to replace the oil from Russia from that area. And you see that you're currently in a level that you need around 11 billion of investment, and currently we've only covered 1 or 2% of that amount. The EU is lacking the depth of the market in order to issue this from a political perspective, and so in reality, the only person that could come and supplement this is the US. So this leaves the EU exposed in a way to US financial actors who, in a way, they act as standalone financial objects, but in the grander scheme of things, also to the US political strategy and the priorities that they have, of course, in the region.
Energy security is no longer only about economics. It is now deeply connected to geopolitics and strategic autonomy. Regional instability rarely stays regional. Interconnected economies, crises travel quickly through markets, migration, inflation, and politics.
Let's look at two different elements. Let's look at migration and let's look at energy prices. So both of these elements have the potential to completely destabilize Europe. If you look at the waves of populism after 2015, in the peak of the migration crisis, and then after COVID and the ensuing inflationary crisis that ensued the Russian war in Ukraine, well, you will be able to tell immediately that the very root of these problems is, first of all, the lack of integration, of political integration and automatic stabilizers inside the EU. But in terms of geopolitical, the geopolitical route is the Eastern Mediterranean and the lack of agency that the EU has in that region. So it is particularly potent, and exactly because of this heterogeneity that we described before, it is particularly difficult for the EU to find a way to sustainably invest and cover the gap that exists. And so it continues to be an ongoing potential weak point for the EU's both foreign policy and for the domestic policy, and the implications for democracy as well.
One blocked shipping route can reshape global markets within days. In today's world, geography still matters.
let's try and think of, I think it was back in 2021 when we had the Evergreen accident, where we had the blockade of the Suez Canal for some days due to the ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal. And we saw immediately how this affected the whole global economy. All of a sudden, you had ships that needed to do all the traditional route all the way to South Africa and then come all the way up, right? This economically, if you will, in terms of financial metrics, this completely spikes up the freight rates, the cost of insurance. It immediately changes the demand for oil, the supply of oil negatively because it takes more time to come. And this is while it might appear that this is a contained risk, in reality, because we all share one global market in energy commodities, the result is that the effect spreads everywhere through the world. So one element, for example, is the Suez Canal. Then the second element, of course, is the risk premium that concerns the EU that we described before, right? When it comes to migration, when it comes to inflation, and the ability of the inability rather of the region to supplement cheap energy during the energy crisis in post 2022. You saw a very big repricing of inflation, higher yields and higher risk premium in European economies, which the result of this was elevated borrowing costs for European economies, with less willingness of international capital markets to borrow, to lend money to the EU, and as a result of this, an effect of moving money away from the EU and into other markets. So you really see this global effect that exists.
But uncertainty does not only affect governments and markets, it shapes the everyday behavior of societies. So, how economies develop in politically complex and uncertain environments?
First time that I visited Israel was with EXCELEM, with the very first iteration of the project that we're currently speaking for. And I was absolutely amazed by this heterogeneity that I described before on one hand, but also with the way that the people have tried and they have found mechanisms to cope with this uncertainty. So I would say that it is particularly interesting when you try and see just how much people are able to internalize the uncertainty that exists, to come up with informal mechanisms and informal institutions which can find solutions when the formal institutions fail. So these institutions can be either familial institutions or institutions that are in the wider social spectrum, or they can even take the form of mechanisms of apps. It's very stunning to see, for example, the prevention apps that Israel has developed, for example, to come up with strikes, a private initiative that was exactly the result of the need to try and predict upcoming strikes and to come up with a mechanism that can ensure the safety of people, for example.
When institutions struggle to respond, societies often rely on trust, family networks, and informal systems to survive uncertainty.
I would say they certainly rely a lot more, as I said before, in this familial network that exists. And I think that the very root of this is that exactly due to the uncertainty that exists, it is the framework that is the most agile. And it is the framework that is the most agile because due to the amount of, I'm assuming, the lack of friction that exists in that cycle, due to the familiarity between people that are of the same family, this is the type of institution that you rely, informal institution, that you rely to when the formal institutions fail. And so you see the presence of the family a lot in the religious rituals, you see it a lot in the work ethics, in the institutions in the work, for example, how much is work valued vis-a-vis, for example, spending time with your family and what the priorities are. I would say that the family aspect is a very central element of state organization in all of these societies, and this is not random.
If instability is interconnected, can cooperation become a solution?
I don't think it's utopia land. I think it definitely has some things that it can achieve, but at the same time, it also has clear limits. what is for sure certain is that the more economic cooperation that you can have, the better it is. We cannot expect economic cooperation to magically solve every problem. However, it is certain that at any given moment, given the limitations that you have, the constraints that you have, to attempt economic cooperation can only do well to remove frictions and to improve cooperation and spillover effects, not only in the economy, but also in the political aspect. I think this is something that we've seen, for example, between Israel and Jordan.
Modern financial systems have developed tools to manage risk, but some forms of uncertainty remain impossible to fully control.
If you look at financial tools, we have financial tools, for example, in order to deal with uncertainty on paper. We have catastrophe bonds, we have private-public partnerships that aim to mitigate risk. So, for example, a thing that the government might often do is say, okay, if this investment is underperforming, I might come and supplement it, I might come and subsidize it, I give this as a guarantee in order to lower the risk premium, in order to attract capital, right? But this just doesn't work as we want it to work in the Eastern Mediterranean, and this is because you never know if the government is going to be there the next day, right? And so, although we have all of these fancy financial innovations and mechanisms, in practice, the fundamental problem of the heterogeneity, both in geography and over time, that we said at the beginning, continues to be persistent. And I think this is the biggest challenge that policymakers face.
Understanding a region like the Eastern Mediterranean requires more than headlines or statistics. It requires exposure, dialogue, and lived experience. Key elements given through EXCELEM 2.0, as Mr. Tsirgis mentions.
Well, because we simply do not know enough about it, and this is a good enough reason to learn about anything. But delving deeper into this for a student of EU studies, perhaps for a Greek person or for a European person, this is an area of such similarity and of such difference at the same time. And this is a particularly interesting mix of similarities and differences that one can really only try to understand by visiting the area, by participating in the type of activities that EXCELEM organizes, in hackathons, in policy challenges, in simulations that we've organized in the past, in study trips, in all of these events. Through exposure with these different cultural elements, one can better understand it. And once you better understand it, you come to realize really the amount of cooperation, I would say, that becomes possible.
But what role can universities and research centers play in helping new generations better understand the Eastern Mediterranean region?
I think universities are one of the few bastions that remain depoliticized today. And I think this is particularly important because a lot of the political conversation is polluted by politicization, by narratives which they're not a priori either correct or wrong, but they need to be examined. They need to be examined over time, and they make the whole process much more complex. An academic setting, in my opinion, gives a sort of protective environment that allows you to view an unpolluted version of a lot of the discussions, and it allows, especially for example, travel grants. I lived in Israel for 6 months, and I was able to do that through funding, through EXCELEM, through the project. That was very eye-opening for me because I could have any conversation on paper, even with people that lived in that area, but to be able to see the things that I saw, really that's the only thing that made me say that for the first time. And I'm not claiming to be an expert, and if you are, you probably aren't. If you claim so, you probably aren't. But to be able to at least say that I think I understand some aspects of the region.
And what about students and young researchers? What role can they play in shaping new perspectives on the Eastern Mediterranean region?
I think there is a lot of work to be done, particularly when you're participating in some sort of activity. It's very important to take the lessons, and after you have your own internal discussion with your own self, what did I learn out of this? To then come and speak with friends, speak with family circles, speak with other social circles, and then disseminate the type of information and the knowledge that you gained. And this is a continuous process. This never stops. And once you are a recipient of this cultural exchange that occurs through this research or travel cooperation, then really you become an active agent for life. And I think this is the role that any person that participates in these exchanges has to play.
The Eastern Mediterranean is not only a region of crisis, it is a mirror of the world we are entering. A world defined by uncertainty, interdependence, and constant transformation. And perhaps understanding this region better can help us better understand the future itself.